Hi friends, welcome to another edition of Quick Tip videos brought to you by dataplatformcentral.com. After a while, we are again going to come back with a new feature which got recently introduced in Azure Data Factory. This new feature is known as lake databases. So let's look at a quick step-by-step video on how to set up a lake database, and let's illustrate using an example of how we can attach a table to an existing lake database and how we can populate the data into a lake database table. So lake database provides an abstract relational database layer over your existing or a new data lake. The lake database allows you to have strict schema enforcement on your data lake data. So when you compare this to the 5 zones of your data lake databases are often associated with the structured and the curated zone of your lake data. Each table defined in a lake database will have a predefined schema based on the data that is coming inside your data lake. In addition, you can also define relationships between multiple tables inside your lake database. So this ensures domain integrity as well as referential integrity for your data lake data. So in this quick step-by-step illustration, we are going to see first of all how we can set up a lake database from within your Azure portal. Once we set up the lake database, we will look at 3 scenarios. The first one is how you can associate an existing data lake storage location as a table inside your lake database. Secondly, we will see how we can create a blank table and associate it to a location within your data lake and later ingest data into it. For ingestion, we will take 2 methods. First one is we will manually try loading files into your data lake and ensure that the lake database table is updated accordingly. And in the last part of this illustration, let's see how we can make use of the Synapse pipelines so as to ingest data into your data lake from an external system. So without wasting any time, let's start looking into each of these 3 scenarios in detail. So in this quick step-by-step illustration, we are going to see first of all how we can set up a lake database from within your Azure portal. Once we set up the lake database, we will look at 3 scenarios. The first one is how you can associate an existing data lake storage location as a table inside your lake database. Secondly, we will see how we can create a blank table and associate it to a location within your data lake and later ingest data into it. For ingestion, we will take 2 methods. First one is we will manually try loading files into your data lake and ensure that the lake database table is updated accordingly. And in the last part of this illustration, let's see how we can make use of the Synapse pipelines so as to ingest data into your data lake from an external system. So without wasting any time, let's start looking into each of these 3 scenarios in detail. Let's start off the first part of the illustration by going to the Azure portal and then navigating to your Synapse Analytics workspace. Once you're inside your home page of the Synapse Analytics workspace, which is your Synapse Analytics Studio, you can go to the Data tab. So once you go to the Data tab, you have the option to create a lake database from within the plus option under Data. So you can just click on that to create a lake database, and as the option shows you, this is still in preview, so you can just click on that and automatically it will provide you with the properties window. So you can name that database like say demo lake db or any suitable name, and then it will point to a linked service. By default, it will point to the default linked service or the default storage account which is associated with your Synapse workspace. So you can select that itself, or if you want to add a new linked service, you can go to the linked tab and you can add one more linked service to point to one of your other Azure data lake storage. So in this case, we are going to use the default linked service which is associated with the Synapse. So once that is done, then you can go inside and you can select the input folder. So in this case, you have multiple input folders here. So I am going to just go to the root folder, open the storage account, and then click on OK, so that it points to the root folder of that. Or if you want to create a separate folder for that, even that is also possible. You can create a separate folder for the database itself. So what you can do is like you can connect to your you can go to the home page of your Azure portal, go to the Azure storage account, and inside that you can create the folder with the name of the database. Even that is also possible. So let's go to the home page and let's go to the storage accounts, and you will have that default storage account which is associated to your Azure Synapse, and inside that you can add a container, and the container will be named the same as name to your folder also. So demo lake database, just create the demo lake database. So that's also now available here, so you can now point to that. So what will happen is that after this, whatever table you are going to create inside lake database directly, it is going to point to the corresponding folder within this root folder. And the data format for the time being, let's set it to Parquet. There are two formats which are currently supported. One is Parquet file, another one is delimited file. So we are setting it to Parquet file. And once that database is created, so once you publish this, the database will get created. So you can click on the publish button and wait for the publishing to be complete. Once the publishing is complete, you can see that the database is now created, and there will not be any tables here because we have just created a database. For creating a table, you can go to the plus table option, and there are three options from that. You can create a custom table, or you can create a table from available set of templates. Each template corresponds to one of the business areas like retail, healthcare, logistics, etc. So there are a handful of projects available here: banking, automotive, agriculture. So based on what type of project you are going to undergo, you can go and select from a set of standard tables the template table. So here what we are going to do is like we are going to attach it to an already existing data lake. So when you select from data lake, it will ask you for the external table name and also the linked service. If you go back to your storage account and see, there is already a folder which is available inside, which consists of some Parquet files. So this folder is actually the order folder, and order folder consists of multiple Parquet files. For the example, we are going to just keep one of the order folder or one of the files inside that, and we are going to attach it to a data lake. So now we have a single file here, and we are going to attach it to a data lake. So let's come here and let's name this table as orders, because that's the data that it contains, and it will then point to the same linked service, which will point to the default linked service of your Synapse. And now inside that we need to point to the folder, so that data is inside a folder called orders. So just point to the folder called orders and click on OK. And once you click on continue, it will automatically try to find out the type of your file. So you can see that it will try to detect the table file, it will try to detect the schema and all the other details. So you can see that the type of the file is Parquet, and if you click on preview data, it will show you the data that is available inside your files. So currently there is only a single file, and it is able to pull the data. So click on create, and you can see that the table is already created. The schema of the table will be taken based on the data that is contained inside your tables. So, and if you see the column information also, it will automatically take the column information, like based on the value, it will take it as integer, date, then depending on the type of the values that you have inside your file. Now once this is created, immediately the table will be available for any kind of querying. So if you refresh this, we have to publish it before that. So once you publish it and then refresh, you will be able to see the table. So publishing is now done. Just click on refresh, and you can see that the new table is now available for querying. So you have multiple options here. If you want to query it using your SQL pool, you can use the new SQL script and select the top 1000 rows row, and when you try to run it, you will be able to see the data which is available from your file. There are only 2 rows in the file, so you should see 2 rows as a result of this query, which is correct. Now if you want to use your Spark pools, that is also possible. So the moment a lake database table is created, immediately the table will be available through your SQL pools and also through your Spark pools. So if you now connect using new notebook, automatically it will ask you to associate it to one of your Spark pool. So it's already associated to the Spark pool that you have created before. If it doesn't have a Spark pool, you have to create one before you query it. And now if you try to execute this, you can see the data which is coming from that particular file, again the 2 rows. So one case it is going to use the SQL pool. In the second case, it is going to use the Spark pool. Gonna take a while, so you have to wait until the Spark pool is up and it starts executing the query. So as you see, the Spark pool has finished executing a query. You can see the same 2 rows inside Spark pool. So what you have done is like you have created a lake database table by pointing into an existing data lake, which points to a folder within your Synapse storage account, and immediately upon creating the table was available for querying within your SQL pool as well as within your Spark. Now let's try appending the table with some data. For the appending of data, what we need to do is we can go to the Synapse pipelines. So we are going to create a pipeline which is going to copy the file from one of our source folders to the storage account which is linked to our data lake table. And now after appending it, if you come back and query the data lake storage location, you can see that the data will be reflected as a new data inside your table. So for that, let's go to the Synapse integrate option, which will correspond to the pipelines, and then you inside that you have the plus option to create a copy data tool. Because this is a simple file to file copy, we are using a copy data tool. If you want to have some kind of transformations in between, you require using a data flow itself. So here we are just using the built-in copy task and we are just going to run it once. And the source type, we are going to point it to a folder within our local system. So for that purpose, I have already installed the integration runtime, and that self-hosted integration runtime would be used for connecting to my file. So what I'm going to do is like I'm going to connect to a file system. So there is an option called file system for the source data type, and I've already created the linked service which is going to point to my machine. So now I'm going to pull the file which is there in my local machine by browsing it, and I'm going to load the file into my storage account location. So I'm going to select the first file, and that file would be, if you want to have a file to file copy, you can select binary copy. In this case that's possible because we are just going to transfer the file as it is to the storage account folder that is associated with our lake database. So the target type you don't have to select anything. You can automatically get the linked service which is automatically created inside your Synapse to connect to your default storage account. This will be available even without creating. So I just pointed to that default linked service which is available, and then I'll browse to the folder. And if you remember, our folder is inside the main folder of that Synapse and under the folder called orders. So I'm going to place this file also inside folder orders, and if you want to rename the file you can do that. So I'm going to just name it like say order data dot parquet. If you leave it as it is, it will take the name of your input file itself, and you have multiple copy behavior and all. Here it is not relevant because we are going to do file to file copy, and click on next, and then you can click on next, and when you run this package, it is going to copy the file as it is to your storage account. And once it is copied to your storage account, the lake database table which is associated to the storage account will be updated as well. So wait for the package to be completed. So go to the monitor tab and keep on hitting the refresh button. Once you see the succeeded message, you know that the file has been successfully copied. Now if you come back and check the storage location, you will be able to see these two files. So go to the storage location and you can see that the new file has been copied and it is being named as order data. Now if you go back and try to query the table, you should be able to see this additional data as well. As you see, now it has more than 2 rows. The first file had only 2 rows. Now all the additional data is coming from the new file which you copy. If you want to see the total number of rows, you can put a count star and see. The same result can be obtained from your Spark pool as well. So immediately every time your table gets appended, the new data will be available through your SQL pool as well as through your Spark pools. Now if you see, there are 1002 rows available from the table which corresponds to the 2 files which is being copied to the location. Like this, you can keep on appending data to your existing data lake. Now let's look at the second approach where we are going to create a new table from scratch and then we are going to add data to the table. So the first approach was we attached an existing data lake to the lake database table. So here we are going to first create the lake database table and then keep on adding data to it. So let's see how that can be done. Now for the second part of this demo, we are going to create a table upfront. So let's go to the lake database, and inside the tables we need to create a new table. For the sake of creating the table, we need to go to the preview tab for the lake database. So when you click on the lake database, you can see the option which gives you the open. So when you click on that open option, it will take you to the preview tab of your lake database. As of now, you can see your single table which you have created already based on the existing data lake. Now for creating a new table, you can go to the plus table option and then automatically it will provide you with all the available ways of creating a table. So now you are going to create it from scratch. So you need to select the custom option, not the option from data lake which corresponds to the case where you are creating a table based on an existing data lake. Here we are going to create it from scratch. So click on custom, and now you are going to give the table a name, which is going to be order items, because that's the table that we are going to create now. And if you see the storage settings, by default it will default to the default settings of your lake database. So it will correspond to the linked service, which points to your default storage, and inside that it is now pointing to the order items folder within your demo lake database, and the data format is also Parquet. So we are not going to change any one of them, but the only thing we are going to define are the columns. So if you go to the columns, currently it is just adding one symbol default column which is of type string. We are going to change it. We are going to make it into different columns. So the first column would be the primary key for that table, which is the item ID, which is the primary key, and I'm going to make it integer. Again, I'm going to add one more column, which is a new column. We are not going to add any partition columns at this stage. So partition column is a column based on which the data will be actually physically partitioned. So in this case, because this is just a demo, I am going to add some sample columns. In the actual case, you would require adding some kind of a partition column so as to make sure that the data is partitioned and stored, which will improve your performance while reading, accessing the data for various reporting or analytical requirements. So we have added a single column called item ID of primary key, and now we are going to add an order ID, which is going to link this order items to one of the available orders. So again, that will be integer, and then the third one would be the product ID, which will correspond to the item within that order. So that will be product ID. Again, that will be also be a integer type. Next one would be the quantity, how many item was purchased of that particular type, and that will be again an integer. And finally we will have the price and the discount. So we will add a list price here. So most often the columns for this table will be chosen based on your source. So if you know that your data comes from a particular source, you can add the same columns as it is coming from your source, or maybe you can check which of them are important ones and you can include those columns. So this will be, it's a price, so it has to be a decimal, and then there will be one more which is the discount, and that will be also decimal. So we added all your columns, and now for saving it you need to click on publish. So once you publish it and the publishing is successful, the table will be committed to your lake database. So now that the publishing is committed, you can come here, click on refresh, and you'll be able to see the two tables, order and order items. Order items is the new table that is created. So as of now there is no data in the order item. So if you try to view the data, it will be blank. So there is not even the directory which is there now. So even if you go to the linked location, you will not be able to see that directory. So you can create one directory here of type order item so that it points to your table location. So now the table is blank because you have created the directory. So now that the table is ready, now you can start adding data to this table. Again, for adding the data, you can use the Synapse pipelines. So let's go to the pipelines, and we are going to store some data into it. So here the thing is that we have first created the table, and now we are going to store the data. So let's again go to the file system and then point to the file location, and inside that you have a folder called order items. So inside that you can select. Let's go to order items, and we are going to select the folder as it is, and the recursive option is selected, so it will make sure that it will iterate through every files in that folder and it will transfer it to the location. And for the target type, you don't have to select any connection. You can just select the default linked service which is associated to your Synapse. And the folder path, if you want, you can select the same folder path which is inside your demo lake DB, and the folder is called order items. So because you have multiple files, it will be defined as it is by the source. So once you have done with this, just wait for the package to be executed. It will iterate through each of the files, and all the files will be transferred as it is. Wait for the execution to be successful. Once you see this succeeded, you can come back and check your location. So go to the location and make sure that the files are now available inside your folder. So the files are now available, so you can go back and try running the query so that you'll be able to see the data from your files. So now if you run this SQL query, you'll be able to see all the data. So you can see all the data coming from your files. And if you want to now check the count also, that's also possible, which means that you have now created the table from scratch from within your lake database and then populated the data by using a Synapse pipeline. You can see that there are 5722 rows of data which comes from all the 4 files. Now let's have the last part of the demo where we are going to create a table as it is on the fly using a Synapse pipeline. So in the first case, you attached an existing data lake as a table inside your data lake database. In the second case, you created the table from lake database and then populated the data using a pipeline. And in the third case, you are using a pipeline to create a table on the fly. So let's see the third part. So here again you have to go back to the Synapse pipelines, and instead of creating a copy data tool this time, I am going to use a proper pipeline with a data flow, just to show the option available inside data flow for directly copying to your data. So you have a data flow and you are going to define a new data flow inside that. And for the source, this time I am going to select a Azure SQL database. So you are going to click on new, and I'm going to select the Azure SQL database, and there is also an existing linked service created which will point to my Azure SQL database, and I have a table called stores inside that. I'm going to select that. So I'm going to select an existing table from my Azure SQL database. I'm going to create a lake database directly based on that. So the source is now ready, and now for the sync, I'm not going to apply any kind of transformations here. It's a direct copy, but if you want to apply any transformations also, that's also possible using all these activities available inside your data flow. So we are going to just select a sync in this case, because the focus of this discussion is to see how a pipeline can be used to create a table on the fly on your lake database. And if you see the sync, you have an option called workspace DB. This is the direct option that can be used for creating a table on the fly on your lake database. So if you see the database, you can see that it lists all the lake database. So just select the lake database you want, which is demo lake DB, and the table you can just type in the value as it is. So I am going to name the table as stores. So just type in the name as stores, and if you go to the mappings and all, it's all set to auto mapping. So just validate it once, and so it shows that there is no error. So you can just publish it all, and once it is published, you can then try executing the pipeline, and you can see that the table will be created on the fly in your lake database based on the data that comes from your Azure SQL database. And correspondingly, there will be a folder created in your Azure Data Lake as well, and it will have the file which contains the full data as it is exported from your source system. It's gonna take a while, so wait until the publishing is done, and even the data flow will also take a while to get executed. So the publishing is now completed. Once it is completed, just go back to the pipeline, and you have the option to trigger it now. So click on trigger now and click on OK, and wait for the data flow execution to be complete. Go to the monitor tab and keep refreshing. Now that the package execution is success, now we can go back and check the lake database. So go back to the data tab and just refresh the tables under your lake database, and you should be able to see the new table called stores. You can see the table called stores. Again, you can try checking the data from the tables by clicking on the select query, and you can see the data from the stores now successfully available. And if you go to the linked storage and you check, you can see that there will be a new folder created under your lake database storage, and that will be called as stores, and you will have the single file which will contain the entire data that is copied from your Azure SQL database as a file inside. So here what we have done in the third case is that we have copied using Synapse pipeline the data from another system, which in this case was an Azure SQL database, into the lake database table as it is. And what it does was like you created a table object on the front end which is accessible from your lake database, and on the background it has created a folder inside your data lake, and it has also copied the data into a associated file. So in this case the file is of type Parquet, because that is the default file format that you have set for your lake database. So whatever settings that you have set for the lake database, each time when you create a new object, those settings will be honored unless you override it. So the data type, the file type would be Parquet, and the file structure would be a folder with the same name as your table inside your database folder. So now in this illustration, we have seen all the three types of how we can create a lake database table. So now the next part of this lake database discussion consists of how you can customize the schema of table by using mappings and similar kind of utilities. That we will be seeing in a further video which will be posted sooner. Hope you enjoyed this quick illustration on how we can create a lake database and how we can create tables inside lake database by the different methods. So lake database is going to be the next popular thing for data lake based designs. As usual, keep sending your feedback and let me know your comments on how this video was. Feel free to follow my channel for getting useful tips like this in future, and make sure you press on the bell icon to get notifications on these kind of useful videos which we are releasing weekly. Meet you all soon with the second part of this video. Till then, bye and have a nice day.